over here! We need a medic!
On a jagged cliff top known as Hacksaw Ridge, wounded American soldiers lay scattered amid smoke and chaos. Private Desmond T. Doss, a slender medic in a mud-soaked uniform, crawls from one injured man to the next. Bullets whiz past as he ties bandages with steady hands. One by one, he drags each soldier to the cliff's edge and lowers them 90 feet down to safety using a rope. His body trembles with exhaustion, yet Desmond refuses to leave anyone behind. When others had retreated, he stayed alone on that blood-stained escarpment, driven by an unbelievable faith and courage. In that desperate hour, as enemy fire lights up the sky, a quiet prayer escapes his lips. Lord, please help me get one more. Each time he saves a man, he prays to save another through the night. He rescues dozens. By dawn, roughly 75 lives have been saved by the unarmed medic. This astonishing act of heroism on Hacksaw Ridge would earn Desmond Doss the Medal of Honor and a place in history. In one night, a gentle Virginia soldier became a legend by living out the words, "Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." John 15:13. Who was Desmond Doss, and what inspired such extraordinary courage? To find the answers, we journey back to his humble beginnings. Desmond Thomas Doss grew up in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, in a quiet Christian home during the Great Depression. He was a kind, shy boy with a big heart and an unwavering faith in God from childhood. Desmond's parents taught him to treasure the Bible and live by the 10 Commandments. A large illustrated scroll of the commandments hung on their wall, and little Desmond often climbed on a chair to study it. One picture on that scroll struck his soul: Cain standing over the bleeding body of his brother Abel, illustrating "Thou shalt not kill," Exodus 20:13. Seeing that image, Desmond made a solemn promise to God that he would never take a life. This conviction ran deep. He believed God's commandments were personal instructions for him to obey always. Even as a boy, Desmond decided he would never kill another person, and he meant it. That conviction was soon tested. One day at school, a group of bullies blocked Desmond's path. He hated violence, but he also didn't like being pushed around. When their leader shoved him, young Desmond's stomach filled with fear, yet he unexpectedly charged back, swinging his fists in self-defense. The bullies scattered in surprise. Desmond won that scuffle, but he was shaken. He knew even a boy's angry punches could hurt someone. He remembered his promise to God. From then on, Desmond resolved to solve conflicts with kindness and courage, not fists or guns. Around this time, an accident left an enduring mark on Desmond's life. At age 8, he fell and slashed open his hand on a glass bottle. The cut severed tendons across his palm. The doctor said he'd never use that hand again. Desmond was heartbroken, unable to play his favorite games. But his mother, Bertha, refused to give up. She gently massaged his little hand every day and prayed for healing. In time, Desmond miraculously regained full use of his fingers. A long scar remained across his palm, sensitive to pain, reminding him of this trial. Yet that wound became a hidden blessing. Unable to roughhouse like other boys, Desmond found new ways to spend his energy. He began joyfully helping others wherever he could. He did extra chores at home and cultivated flowers with his mother, then gave bouquets to cheer up lonely neighbors. He even took bouquets to the local jail to encourage prisoners. Desmond discovered that sharing kindness was even better than playing games. It gave him a deep happiness to brighten others' lives. As a young teen, Desmond's caring nature grew stronger. One Sabbath day at church, an urgent call came. A local woman lay dying in a hospital, needing a blood transfusion. Desmond rushed to the hospital to donate his own blood for this stranger. He was just a skinny boy, and afterward he nearly fainted from weakness, but he didn't hesitate to help. His blood saved the woman's life. When she and her husband thanked him and offered a gift, Desmond simply asked them to come back to church. The couple did return, becoming active members of the congregation, a present that gladdened Desmond's heart. Through experiences like this, Desmond learned that helping others was his calling. He felt God had put him on earth not to harm, but to heal. In his own words, while others are taking life, I will be saving life. Desmond's faith was the guiding light of his youth. He read his Bible daily and prayed about everything. He took literally the commandment to remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. Exodus 28. Each Saturday, from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, Desmond's family worshiped God and rested. Desmond would do no work or play on the Sabbath. That day belonged to the Lord. He also took care of his body as the temple of God. He avoided alcohol, tobacco, and even certain foods the Bible calls unclean. These choices were unusual in his community, but Desmond stood by them with humble confidence. He was a gentle, dutiful boy who honored his parents, loved Scripture, and showed compassion to everyone. All these early experiences poured the mold for the man he would become, a man perfectly suited to be a life-saving medic. Yet no one could imagine just how crucial Desmond's convictions would become when world events hurled him into war. By Desmond's early 20s, World War II had broken out. Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan threatened freedom across the globe, and young Americans were answering the call to defend their country. Desmond felt the call too. Although he was a devout Christian who abhorred violence, he dearly loved his country. When Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941, Desmond's patriotic duty stirred inside him. He wanted to serve the nation that had given him so much freedom. But how could he, a man who refused to kill or even carry a weapon, join the military? After much prayer and soul-searching, Desmond found his answer. He would enlist as a medic, an Army combat medic. That way he could fulfill his duty to country by saving lives, not taking them. In April 1942, against his father's worried wishes, 23-year-old Desmond Doss volunteered for the United States Army. With tears, he told his family goodbye and set off to basic training. He carried with him his childhood Bible and an unwavering resolve. He would serve God and country without compromising either one. All of Desmond's values, his respect for life, his devotion to God's commandments, his gentle spirit of service, would soon be put to the ultimate test. The Army would challenge everything he believed. How would this unarmed Christian stand firm in the midst of military training and war? The next chapter of Desmond's story would reveal the strength of his faith under fire. When Private Desmond Doss arrived at boot camp in 1942, he quickly found himself in a different world. He was assigned to the 77th Infantry Division at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. From the outset, Desmond's beliefs collided with military routine. On his very first day, he stunned his unit by politely refusing a rifle. As the other new recruits lined up to receive their guns, Desmond stood aside. "I'm sorry, sir," he said softly to the supply sergeant. "I cannot carry a weapon." The officers were dumbfounded. This skinny country boy would not even touch a gun. They ordered him again and again, but Desmond respectfully shook his head. He told them he had received a higher order, "Thou shalt not kill," and he wouldn't budge from it. The Army had never seen a recruit quite like Desmond Doss. Some thought he was a coward. Others thought he was crazy. How could a soldier refuse to even hold a gun? It didn't take long for Desmond's fellow soldiers to turn on him. In training camp, he became an outcast. His unit learned he was a devout Christian who kept the seventh-day Sabbath and wouldn't handle a weapon, and they began to mock him relentlessly. At night in the barracks, Desmond would kneel by his bunk to pray. The other men jeered and cursed at him. They tossed their muddy boots at him in the dark. They sneered, "Hey, Doss, say a prayer for us, you holy preacher boy." Desmond silently endured the ridicule, though it hurt him deeply. He had never heard such foul language in his life. The barracks rang with cursing and crude jokes, and some men even took the Lord's name in vain just to see Desmond wince. One grizzled older soldier named Howell snarled, "Doss, when we get into combat, I'll make sure you don't come back alive. I'll shoot you myself." Others echoed that threat, taunting that Desmond would be a danger to them on the battlefield. No one understood why he wouldn't fight. To them, he was a coward hiding behind a Bible. Despite the insults, Private Doss kept treating everyone with respect. He woke early, studied his Bible, and did his duties with dedication except on Saturdays when he requested permission to attend church. His superiors didn't know what to do with him. At first they tried to make him quit. They assigned him extra dirty jobs, hoping to break his resolve. One Saturday morning, an officer ordered Desmond to scrub the barracks floor, a mundane chore that could easily wait. Desmond gently replied that he could do any duty needed for emergencies like tending sick soldiers, but he could not needlessly work on his Sabbath. For Desmond, cleaning floors on the holy day would violate his conscience. The officer exploded in anger and locked Desmond in the barracks, while the rest of the unit worked just to punish him. The men called him lazy and worse. Another time, a major denied Desmond a pass to attend church, threatening, "If you ask again, I'll court-martial you." Desmond simply smiled and resolved to trust God. No matter what pressure came, he would not break God's Sabbath, but he also refused to be disrespectful or rebellious. This gentle, unarmed private was walking a lonely road. He stood alone in his convictions, with virtually everyone, his peers and commanders, set against him. Things got so bad that Desmond's commanding officers attempted to force him out of the army. They declared him mentally unfit because he wouldn't carry a rifle. They even tried to court-martial him for disobeying orders to bear arms. Desmond was threatened with prison, dishonor, and abuse, but he never raised his voice in anger. He loved his country and wanted to serve, but on God's terms. At one point, completely frustrated, Desmond's captain shouted, "Doss, why don't you just go home? You're nothing but trouble here." But Desmond calmly replied, "I can't go home a coward, I must stay and save lives as a medic." He believed this was his God-given mission. Seeing his unshakable stance, the officers finally backed down. A military tribunal reviewed Desmond's case and affirmed his rights as a conscientious objector, a soldier who by law could serve without a weapon. At last, the Army moved Desmond out of the infantry and officially made him a medic in the medical detachment. The men of Company B, 1st Battalion, 307th Infantry would go into battle with Private Doss as their aid man, carrying bandages and a Bible instead of a rifle. Even after he was vindicated on paper, life in boot camp didn't get easier for Desmond. His unit still saw him as the odd one. They teased him for reading his Bible during free time and praying before meals. They nicknamed him Preacher and snickered that he thought himself holier than them. Some tried to tempt him into breaking his rules, offering him cigarettes or whiskey, but Desmond politely declined every time he wouldn't curse, drink, or carouse. And this made the troublemakers in his platoon even angrier. One night, a soldier even approached Desmond with menace and snarled, "Doss, if you ever send aid to a wounded Japanese soldier, I swear I'll kill you myself." The hatred was real. Desmond spent many nights in that barracks praying through tears, asking God to help him love the very men who wanted to harm him. It was a lonely, soul-testing time. Yet through it all, Private Doss stayed true to his principles. He responded to cruelty with patience, doing his best on every training exercise. Over time, a few fair-minded soldiers saw that Doss wasn't actually lazy or cowardly. He marched long miles and carried heavy packs like everyone else, never complaining. He just wouldn't touch a weapon or work on Sabbath. In fact, they noticed Desmond was often the first to lend a hand to any fellow soldier in need. Gradually, a quiet respect began to grow. Some of the men realized, this guy really lives what he believes. During this period, a bright spot entered Desmond's life. In early 1942, while stationed in Virginia, Desmond met a young woman named Dorothy Schutte at church. Dorothy was a kind, devout girl who loved God as much as he did. She was training to be a nurse and had a gentle heart for service. Desmond was immediately smitten. Every furlough or free weekend, he would travel miles to visit her. Their friendship blossomed into love. Dorothy saw Desmond's sincerity and faith, and she loved his humble, caring spirit. In August 1942, just before Desmond's unit was to be deployed, the two were married in a small church ceremony. Desmond wore his army uniform. Dorothy wore a simple white dress. They promised to support each other through whatever lay ahead. As a wedding gift, Dorothy gave her new husband a small pocket Bible. Inside, she inscribed a verse for him. "There hath no temptation taken you but such as is common to man, but God is faithful." 1 Corinthians 10:13. She wanted Desmond to remember that God would be with him in every trial. Desmond treasured that Bible more than anything. He slipped it into his breast pocket over his heart. Now, as he prepared to face war, he would carry the Word of God and his wife's love with him into battle. Desmond's training days had forged him like steel. He entered the army a lonely misfit, but he left as a man of resolved faith, ready to fulfill his purpose. He had endured ridicule and stood alone for what was right now. With his unit sailing for war in the Pacific, Desmond's true test was about to begin. Would his comrades finally accept him when bullets started flying? The battlefield would reveal the courage and character of this unarmed medic in ways none of them expected. In the spring of 1944, Desmond Doss's division deployed to the Pacific Theater. First came the island of Guam, then the bloody campaign of Leyte, and the Philippines War was nothing like training camp. It was far worse. The dense jungles exploded with enemy fire. Men fell wounded or worse every day. And there in the midst of the chaos was Private Doss, running into harm's way without a weapon to rescue his fallen comrades. As soon as his unit saw Desmond in action, their attitude began to change. The same soldiers who had mocked him now watched in astonishment as Doss sprinted through bullets and shells to treat the wounded. He dragged men to safety, shielded them with his own body, and prayed with them in their dying moments. It didn't matter to Desmond whether a man was American or even Japanese. If someone was hurt, Desmond's instinct was to help. He believed, as long as there is life, there is hope. More than once, other medics declared a soldier hopeless, but Desmond refused to give up. In one battle, a soldier had both legs blown off by a grenade, and medics left him for dead. Desmond rushed to that man's side and cried, "He's still breathing." Ignoring enemy fire, Desmond bandaged the man's severed legs and carried him on his back to an aid station. That soldier lived because Desmond saw value in every life. While others saw only a hopeless casualty, Desmond saw a man whom God still cared for. He would not abandon anyone. Battle after battle, Desmond's fearless compassion saved lives. On the island of Leyte, during a fierce firefight in late 1944, Desmond's unit was pinned down by Japanese machine guns. Screams of "Medic! Medic!" rang out. Desmond charged forward under fire to reach two men hit by shrapnel. As bullets chewed up the ground around him, he calmly tended their wounds and then, with bullets zipping past his head, dragged them both back to cover. Moments later, a mortar shell hit nearby, injuring several more Americans. Desmond did not hesitate. He crawled on his belly to each wounded man, applied tourniquets and morphine, and got them all to safety. His comrades were stunned. The skinny kid they'd bullied was now their lifeline on the battlefield. Hardened soldiers who once threatened to kill Desmond if he didn't carry a gun now protected him fiercely in combat, because they knew Doss would risk his life to save theirs. As the Leyte campaign wore on, something happened that marked a turning point in Desmond's relationships. Among Desmond's unit was a tough older soldier named Tex Carger, the same man who had cursed him in the barracks at Fort Jackson and vowed to shoot him. Carger was cynical and rough, always looking out for himself. But the misery of war was breaking even the hardest men. One day, during a brutal stretch of fighting in Leyte, Carger stumbled up to Desmond with trembling hands and bloodshot eyes. Desmond braced himself, expecting an insult or worse. Instead, the man's chin quivered and he blurted desperately, "Pray for me, Doss." Desmond was taken aback. This was the last thing he expected from his tormentor. For a moment he couldn't speak. Then he gently replied, "I will pray for you, but you need to pray too." Carger's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how," he choked out. "I never prayed in my life, but my time's running out. When I get home, I'm going to start going to church." Desmond put a compassionate hand on the man's arm. "Don't wait. Do it now. We may not get home from this." The battle-weary soldier nodded and whispered, "I'll try. Thank you." He trudged back to his foxhole and Desmond never saw him again. In that brief exchange, the wall of hostility around Desmond crumbled. The men realized Doss truly lived his faith. Even the toughest among them sensed something different about him, something trustworthy and real. From that day forward, many of the soldiers began to respect Desmond openly. Some even joined him in prayer before combat. The ones who once ridiculed him now quietly said, "Doss, if you pray, please pray for me too." By the end of the Lady operation, Desmond Doss had become a beloved figure in his company. His constant bravery under fire earned him 2 Bronze Star medals for valor, one for Guam and one for Leyte, a high honor for heroic service. But more importantly to Desmond, he earned the trust of his brothers in arms. The men knew that, in the worst of battle, Desmond would be there for them. After the grueling campaigns in the Philippines, the 77th Division was sent to a rest area. Desmond, utterly exhausted, collapsed into a tent and slept for days. His friend and fellow medic James kept him fed while he recovered. Desmond had pushed himself beyond normal limits. Treating countless wounds and saving many lives, he found strength in each small miracle and in every prayer he whispered on the battlefield. But the war was not over. In fact, the biggest and deadliest battle lay just ahead. As Desmond regained his strength, word came that the 77th Division would soon sail for Okinawa, a Japanese island fortress that would be one of the war's final and bloodiest showdowns. Desmond had no idea that his greatest trial and finest hour would come on a rocky escarpment there, a place called Hacksaw Ridge. By now, Desmond Doss was no longer the loneliest soldier. He had proven himself under fire and won over the men who once shamed him. But even as he rested, a sense of foreboding hung over the division. The Battle of Okinawa loomed, a battle fiercer than anything they had seen. Desmond's faith and courage would soon be tested as never before. Could one unarmed medic make a difference in the inferno about to come? The answer would unfold high atop Hacksaw Ridge, in an epic tale of bravery and redemption. In April 1945, the U.S. Army landed on Okinawa, the last step toward Japan. The island turned into a brutal crucible of war. The 77th Division, including Desmond's Company B, was tasked with assaulting the Maida Escarpment, a towering 400-foot cliff nicknamed Hacksaw Ridge. The Japanese had fortified the top of this ridge with tunnels, caves, and guns. It was a deadly stronghold. To capture it, American troops would have to climb up cargo nets under enemy fire and fight an unseen foe entrenched in the heights. By now, Desmond was a seasoned combat medic of 26 years old. He had survived Guam and Leyte. But he sensed that Okinawa would be different. Before the assault on Hacksaw Ridge, Desmond took time to observe the Sabbath. On Saturday, May 5, 1945, the very day of the planned attack, Desmond woke early. He found a quiet spot at the base of the cliff, sat on a rock, and opened the little Bible Dorothy had given him. Around him, the din of war prepared to erupt, but for a moment, Desmond's heart was in peace. He read his Bible lesson and prayed, thinking of his wife and family back home worshiping in safety. That day, when he finished his prayer, Desmond felt renewed strength. It was time to climb into battle. He would bring God's peace with him up that ridge. As the company gathered at the foot of Hacksaw Ridge, tension gripped the soldiers. Looking up, they could see nothing over the cliff's edge, but they knew the enemy was waiting. The men were anxious. Many were pale with fear. Seeing this, the commanding officer called for a moment's pause. To everyone's surprise, one of the lieutenants then suggested, "Doss, lead us in prayer before we go." All heads turned to Desmond. He had been praying for each man silently. Now they wanted him to pray aloud. Desmond's gentle face flushed, but he stepped forward. In a clear, humble voice, he prayed, "Our Heavenly Father, please give our lieutenant wisdom and guide our steps. Protect us according to your will, and help those who are not ready to meet you to make their peace. In Jesus' name, amen." A hush fell. Hardened fighters who had never prayed now stood silently, absorbing the words. When Desmond finished, the men felt a strange calm. "Amen," many whispered. It was time. The Americans began their ascent up the cargo nets, climbing hand over hand up the cliff face. Reaching the top, they entered what looked like a nightmare. The plateau of Hacksaw Ridge was a maze of blasted rocks, tree stumps, and smoky haze. At first, all was eerily quiet. The Japanese had hidden themselves in tunnels. Company B moved forward cautiously. Suddenly, enemy machine guns and mortars unleashed a storm of fire. The battlefield erupted. Men scrambled for cover as shells burst and bullets flew. In those first moments, casualties were heavy. Several soldiers in the first wave fell dead or wounded right at the cliff's edge. Yet as the chaos unfolded, an astonishing pattern emerged. None of Desmond's immediate squad were hit. While other units were cut down, the men around Desmond advanced with almost no harm. Only one of Desmond's comrades suffered a minor injury. A piece of rock cut his hand. It seemed impossible, but Desmond wasn't surprised. He whispered to a buddy, "God answered our prayer." He truly believed that brief prayer had placed a special protection over them. For the first hour of fighting, Desmond's platoon managed to secure a portion of the ridge with minimal losses. His commanding officers later described it as miraculous. Desmond simply thanked God for hearing them. But the battle was far from over. As more American troops poured onto the ridge, the Japanese resistance grew ferocious. Enemy soldiers popped out of hidden caves, firing rifles and lobbing grenades. Desmond sprang into action, tending the first wounded he saw. He crawled to one soldier with a bullet wound and pressed a bandage on it under fire. He then dashed over to a man whose leg was shattered by shrapnel, quickly splinting it. He was in constant motion, darting from one injured man to the next, whispering words of comfort amid the roar of battle. Bullets kicked up dust at his heels, but Desmond kept his cool. Other medics later marveled that Doss seemed to have no fear at all. Or perhaps he did. But his compassion was greater than his fear. After hours of brutal combat, Japanese forces mounted a fierce counterattack. They swarmed out from their tunnels, forcing the Americans to retreat toward the cliff. A deadly hail of artillery, mortars, and machine gun fire rained down, inflicting heavy casualties. Under this onslaught, the U.S. troops on top panicked. Hundreds scrambled for the ropes to climb back down. The order was given to fall back, every man for himself. In the mad scramble, scores of wounded soldiers were left lying on the battlefield. Their cries echoed over the ridge. Desmond watched his fellow soldiers drop their gear and run for the cliff ladders. He understood the terror. The enemy fire was overwhelming. But he couldn't bear it. So many wounded would be abandoned to die. Desmond made a fateful decision in that moment. Instead of retreating, he ran the opposite direction, back into the fire-swept area to rescue the fallen. What followed is the stuff of legend. Desmond found a wounded man and dragged him to the cliff's edge. With no one to help, Desmond rigged up a rope-lowering system using knots he'd learned as a boy, and carefully lowered the injured soldier over the precipice to the medics below. Hearing that first man safely reach the bottom, Desmond immediately turned back for another. His hands were raw and his arms ached, but he prayed, "Lord, help me get one more." Over the next several hours, Desmond single-handedly evacuated man after man from the top of Hacksaw Ridge. The Japanese defenders, strangely, did not kill him. Later, some of Desmond's comrades wondered if the enemy soldiers hesitated, awed by the sight of one unarmed medic carrying their wounded away. Whatever the reason, Desmond moved almost as if invisible, crawling from body to body, administering morphine, dressing wounds, and then dragging each man to the cliff's edge to be lowered. Each time he lowered a soldier to safety, Desmond prayed out loud, "Please, Lord, help me get one more." And each time he summoned the strength to go back for another. He rescued Americans who had been cut off behind enemy lines and even some wounded Japanese soldiers, treating them with the same care, though his own men warned they'd shoot him for it. Desmond was determined that no one should die if he could help it. Down below, the medics couldn't believe their eyes. Soldiers at the base of the ridge saw wounded men descend one after another on a rope. Who on earth was still up there? When they realized it was Doss working alone on top under fire, word spread like wildfire. "That crazy medic is up there saving everyone." Desmond's strength seemed superhuman. Many of the men he saved were larger than he was, but he found ways to drag or carry them through the dirt and debris. He later said modestly, "I just kept praying to have the strength to save one more." And he did, over and over until the sky grew dark. By the time Desmond Doss finally slumped to the ground at the cliff's edge, utterly spent, he had rescued an estimated 75 men from certain death. Some thought it was more. Desmond thought it was less. When officers wanted to credit him with 100, Desmond said, "It couldn't have been more than 50. They settled on 75 for the official record. 75 families would see their husbands, fathers, and sons again because of Desmond's actions that night. It was a staggering achievement for one unarmed man. He saved my life, many would later say gratefully of Doss. To them, Desmond's courage on Hacksaw Ridge was nothing short of a miracle. When the battered remnants of Company B regrouped at the bottom of the cliff, Desmond finally came down too, lowering himself with that same rope. His hands were bleeding and rope burned. His uniform was stiff with other men's blood, and he could barely stand from weariness. Yet he had a serene look on his face. The men greeted him like a hero, some with tears in their eyes. Even his old drill sergeant, the one who had threatened to court-martial him, rushed up and embraced Desmond. "Doss, you're a hero." The sergeant choked out. Desmond, ever humble, shook his head. "I just couldn't leave them," he said simply. The next day, fresh troops took Hacksaw Ridge, and Desmond's unit was sent to the rear. Before they left, someone noticed Desmond's bloody uniform buzzing with flies. They promptly got him a clean set of fatigues, a luxury in the field, because he deserved honor. That week, Major General A.D. Bruce, the division commander, came personally to congratulate Desmond for his astounding bravery. For his heroism on Hacksaw Ridge, Desmond Doss was recommended for the Medal of Honor, America's highest military award. The soldiers in Desmond's company already knew he deserved it 100 times over. To them, he was the miracle of Hacksaw Ridge. But Desmond's Okinawa story did not end there. A few weeks later, in May 1945, the battle raged on and Desmond continued to risk his life for his comrades. On May 21st, during a dangerous night patrol beyond the ridge, Desmond was with a few soldiers on high ground. Suddenly, a Japanese grenade exploded at his feet. The blast ripped into Desmond's legs, shattering bones and leaving multiple pieces of shrapnel embedded in his flesh. He was seriously wounded. Unable to walk, medics placed him on a stretcher and began carrying him back. As they struggled over the rough terrain, Desmond saw another man on the ground, badly injured and calling out. Despite his own agony, Desmond insisted the medics put him down and take the other man first. "You're the one we started out with, Doss," one medic argued, meaning they wanted to save Desmond. But Desmond refused. "No, this man is worse off. Take him." Knowing the head wound of the other soldier was more critical, Desmond convinced the stretcher bearers to carry that man and come back later for him. Now Desmond lay alone in the dark, leg wounds bleeding, waiting for help. As he lay praying, an enemy sniper spotted him. A rifle crack pierced the night, and a bullet struck Desmond's left arm, splintering the bone. The pain was excruciating, but that sniper's bullet had a providential twist. Had Desmond not rolled slightly at that moment, the bullet would have hit him in the chest. In fact, it would have killed the very comrade Desmond had just saved, had Desmond not been in the way. Even wounded, Desmond managed to save a life. Now, with a compound fracture in his arm and shrapnel in his legs, Desmond was in a dire state. But this remarkable soldier was not done demonstrating courage. Alone and badly wounded, he used his good arm to splint the broken one. He found a rifle stock in the dark and tied it to his shattered arm as a brace. Then Desmond, crawling on hands and knees, began the impossible 300-yard trek to safety. It took hours of agonizing effort. He crawled until he lost consciousness. Finally, just before dawn, comrades found him and carried him to the field hospital. Desmond Doss's war was over, but not a single man had died on his watch if he could help it. As Desmond recovered from his wounds, he realized something precious was missing: his little Bible. The Bible Dorothy gave him had slipped from his pocket during the chaos of battle and was lost somewhere on Hacksaw Ridge. Desmond told anyone who would listen, "Please, my Bible. I've lost my Bible." When the men of his company heard this, they did something extraordinary. They volunteered to search for Desmond's Bible on the battlefield. These tough soldiers, who once mocked Desmond for reading that very book, now spread out across the shell-torn, enemy-filled ridge to find it for him. And find it they did. Against all odds, one of them spotted the Bible in the mud and debris. They returned it to Desmond, intact with Dorothy's letter inside to Desmond. This was the greatest gift his comrades could have given him. It showed how much they had come to love and respect their medic. In a way, those men were redeeming the kindness Desmond had shown them. The soldier once shunned as an outsider had become their brother. Okinawa was finally secured in June 1945. A few months later, with the war over, Desmond Doss was summoned to Washington, D.C. On October 12, 1945, a very nervous Desmond stood on the White House lawn in his best Army uniform. His left arm was in a sling, and he was still weak from his injuries, but he stood proudly. President Harry S. Truman was there to present the Medal of Honor to a select few heroes. Desmond's turn came. He stepped forward, shyly. President Truman took Desmond's hand warmly and did something unexpected. He held on to Desmond's hand and pulled him in close. Looking this humble young man in the eyes, the president said, "I'm proud of you. You really deserve this." As the blue ribbon was placed around Desmond's neck, the president added softly, "I consider this a greater honor than being president." Those words from the commander-in-chief brought tears to Desmond's eyes. Only 5 years earlier, he had been a carpenter's son in the hills of Virginia. Now he was receiving the nation's highest honor for valor. Desmond didn't see it as his own glory. He saw it as God's grace. He later said the real heroes were the ones who never came back. Desmond's Medal of Honor citation recounted his outstanding bravery and unflinching determination in the face of desperately dangerous conditions, and praised how this conscientious objector had saved so many lives. At age 26, Corporal Desmond T. Doss had become the first non-combatant in American history to receive the Medal of Honor. Yet Desmond remained as humble as ever. On that day, he simply thanked the Lord for giving him strength to do his duty. He also thanked his comrades, for he felt the medal belonged to all of them who fought and sacrificed on Hacksaw Ridge. Desmond Doss's story is one of faith, love, and unwavering principle triumphing in the darkest of circumstances. It's the true story of a man who literally lived the teachings of Christ on the battlefield. Desmond took the words, "Thou shalt not kill," Exodus 20:13, into war, and proved that one could show mercy even amid carnage. He demonstrated the power of real Christian conviction, not by preaching sermons, but by acts of selfless love. When fellow soldiers cursed him, he blessed them. When they persecuted him, he stood firm with grace, and when they lay wounded and helpless, he risked everything to save them. In Desmond's own life, we see reflected the biblical promise that God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able. 1 Corinthians 10:13. Desmond faced unimaginable fear and pressure, but God made a way for him to stand true. He became a living example that with God's help, ordinary people can do extraordinary things. This warm-hearted medic from Virginia ended up saving not only the 75 men he dragged off Hacksaw Ridge, he saved hundreds more lives through those men. Think of the generations that exist because of Desmond's courage, the children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of the soldiers he rescued. All those families have life today because Desmond refused to compromise his principle of greater love. Truly, as Jesus said, "Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." John 15:13. Desmond lived those words. He again and again laid his life on the line for his friends, and even for those who once treated him as an enemy. His name, once a joke among his peers, became a legend of gallantry throughout the 77th Division. By the end of the war, every man from privates to generals knew of Desmond Doss's example. Yet Desmond himself would be the first to give credit to God. He felt that Hacksaw Ridge was a place of miracles, not because of him, but because God answered prayer there. Desmond's story reminds us that standing firm in your faith can inspire and redeem others in ways you might never anticipate. Had he given up, or given in at any point? Taken a gun, worked on Sabbath, abandoned a wounded man? His story would not shine as it does today. But because he stayed true, his light pierced through the hate and bloodshed. His actions brought a touch of heaven's mercy into the hell of war. When the men of his company searched for his lost Bible, it showed how much his witness had touched their hearts. The kindness he gave was returned by those who once scorned him, a beautiful picture of reconciliation and respect. Desmond's life is an encouraging testament to what God can do with a willing servant. He wasn't a preacher or a statesman. He was a quiet, unassuming man, a man of simple faith. He only had a grade school education. Yet he ended up changing those around him through that faith. We learn from Desmond that one person, no matter how ordinary, can make an extraordinary difference by faithfully following God's word. His commitment to nonviolence, Sabbath rest, and healthy living were all parts of his faith that many didn't understand. But God honored Desmond's faithfulness in each of those areas. Perhaps we won't find ourselves on literal battlefields, but in the battles of everyday life, Desmond's example calls us to stand for what is right, to care for others above ourselves, and to trust God with the outcomes. His story also reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it by love. Desmond was surely afraid at times, yet the love of God and love for his fellow man pushed him to act in spite of fear. That kind of love can transform communities and even battlefields. As Desmond Doss often said later, "I was not alone on that ridge. The Lord was with me." His legacy continues to inspire millions today. Desmond's Medal of Honor shines not just as a military decoration, but as a symbol of faith rewarded. It shows that living by the teachings of Christ, humility, mercy, peacemaking, is not weakness, but incredible strength. Even in a world full of violence, goodness can prevail when anchored in conviction. Desmond passed away in 2006 at the age of 87, but his story lives on, urging each of us to examine our own lives. What are the ridges in our world that need someone to stand up with courage and compassion? You and I might not wear an army uniform, but we can choose, like Desmond, to live by principle and help those in need, trusting God every step of the way. The true story of Desmond T. Doss is a shining illustration of faith in action. A gentle Christian who would not carry a gun ended up becoming one of the bravest soldiers of World War II. His unwavering commitment to God and love for others brought hope and redemption to a place as dreadful as Hacksaw Ridge. In the face of bullets and bloodshed, Desmond proved that the power of love is stronger than the power of hate. This is the legacy of Desmond Doss, a life that teaches us that no matter how dark the times, light can shine through a single willing heart.